Freedom Council is nothing without all of you. How do we go about getting people held criminally responsible for their acts? The military is still at risk. Election interference, the medicalization of childhood. These drug dealers like Pfizer and Moderna, we can seize their property. We develop our litigation through conferences like this. It's going to come through communications. It's going to come through conversations. And Freedom Council is that conversation.
For information, visit freedomcouncil.org.
I knew as early as February 2020 that I needed to do something.
I recognized that there was a systematic problem and that this was not about hydroxychloroquine, it was something larger.
Fear shut the world down, and people made a lot of money at it as they were killing us.
I was asked to speak at a freedom rally that was set up to discredit my reputation.
Whoever orchestrated this must not have the safety of this nation in mind.
Medicine and politics should be separated. These doctors were handcuffed.
The American public has awakened. We have a new civil rights movement to restore our rights, and we're going to hold them accountable.
It is a natural progression of a man of God or woman of character to see injustice, to seek it out, and then to act upon it.
Do you hear me? We will never lock down again. This is the hill we die on.
Don't miss New American Heroes with attorney Warner Mendenhall and John Davidson, Mondays on BrokenTruth.tv.
You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage.
And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game's won.
I like that one. Hi, I'm John Davidson, and today is another day of Broken Truth with Freedom Council's Warner Mendenhall and Safe Blood's lovely and delightful R. Clinton Ohlers, PhD. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Really good.
So we got a couple of big events coming up this week. We're going to talk a little shop about the industry. What's the first one? Clinton, you just got back from one, right?
Yeah, I was just at a Healthy America conference in Cleveland on Thursday and Friday. And those conferences are now occurring quarterly. There'll be another one in, towards the end of the year, another one in January, and then again in July. They meet annually in DC in July. And the goal of these conferences is to bring innovators in the field of wellness and health technologies together with entrepreneurs. And so, and not just the technologies, but also people who are active in the space where they're offering services and doing political action like we are at Safe Blood, or if they are, lobbyists and that kind of thing, bringing everyone together to really increase the effectiveness and the reach of the MAHA movement.
Nice.
And so I'm very enthusiastic about these conferences. They really seem to be having an impact and bring interesting people together.
Yeah, it's fun how many we have.
How did I miss that you were in Cleveland, Clinton?
Well, as it might be not expected, we should have connected. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I apologize. I was in and out very quickly.
Well, no, I have been absolutely buried, and but I would have definitely made an effort to get up there. To at least meet you for a minute, meet up with you for a minute. But time you're close, let me know, please.
Now, the next thing is coming up is the Brownstone Institute has an event this weekend.
Yeah, Brownstone has just been phenomenal. It's really like, it just really helps to set some of the intellectual foundations for a lot of the things that we may be litigating, that we're certainly discussing. Some well-known people who are going to be there at that conference are Jay Bhattacharya, Ryan Cole, Bobby Ann Cox, who did the quarantine litigation in New York, Laura Delano, and she's got a great story and is out there on the the drug treatment for depression and emotional issues and the problems with it. Aaron Day will be there on, obviously he talks a lot about cryptocurrency, and he actually ran for president at one point. Marianne Damasi from Australia, who's a really, really good journalist on these issues and has a lot of real knowledge about the pharmaceutical industry and what's been going on. I mean, I can go on and on. Ed Dowd, who we know, who looks at the disability rates and how much they've increased, along with the death rates. And then Bree Dressen from React 19. The Malones will be there. Leslie Manukian. I mean, I'm not sure if they're all familiar. Everybody in the audience is familiar with them, but these are people who we really have worked with for years and respect a great deal.
There's Scott Jensen too. Yeah.
Yeah. Brett Weinstein will be there. A lot of people, know about him. Jeff Tucker, is really who drives this conference and has driven this. It's almost kind of like a think tank, but I would say it works a little bit differently. In a sense, the debate is very robust and freewheeling. They're really trying to, oh, there you go. Yeah. They're really trying to get answers. And Kim has such a compelling story about her husband's experience with pharmaceuticals and what she's been through. Just on and on and on. Meryl Nass, I see her on there, so I don't know. I look forward to being there and speaking with everybody there and, seeing how we can continue to collaborate. There's lots of issues that we need the intellectual input on that help underlay what we're doing as attorneys.
Yeah. Now, the next event after this one is CHD has an event.
Yeah.
Right? Children's Health Defense.
Yes. Maybe we could, can you put the links for people on the screen in case they want to attend either in person or virtually these events? Is that possible?
Yeah. Let me,
and I know CHD
this.
for sure has a virtual link. Maybe Brownstone does. But yeah, the CHD event is going to be phenomenal. Our efforts and the synergies that are occurring, they just keep growing and growing. Our own group, Freedom Council, continues to add attorneys. It's every week we're adding new attorneys, and I feel like there's a little bit of an acceleration of that going on right now, which I'm very pleased to see. I think that our challenge in the future is, identifying the issues. We grew out of COVID, obviously, from a very small group of attorneys into this now fairly large group of almost 300 and growing. But what are the issues that are coming up right now? And I got to tell you, I think that, local government accountability. I've talked to some of the attorneys today who are working on local government accountability issues, which are mandamus issues, quo warranto issues. Quo warranto is where somebody's holding an office they shouldn't hold because some process was messed up and they got appointed or got, to an office they shouldn't be in.
Right.
There's so many possibilities starting at the local level to hold local governments accountable. And then we still have a lot of Administrative Procedures Act type cases that we really need to go after. The main one that's just front and center for me is the definition of vaccine. The only way that they got this through was classifying mRNA products as vaccines, and they are not. Even the companies themselves prior to 2020 classified these as gene therapies and not as vaccines. It's a completely different regulatory environment. We really, and that's one of the things that, among the Freedom Counselors, we're fighting about vaccines and vaccine exemptions. Well, what if we were able to say, well, these aren't even vaccines, you couldn't have mandated them. So we almost need to go back to the beginning and clean up some of the things that I wish had been addressed more directly. And I get that it's hard, and I get that under the Biden administration, it might have been impossible. And I get that prior to a case called Loper versus Bright Enterprises, before the Loper case came out, that limited our administrative state in terms of its power, I think we had a very difficult issue. But I think Loper has opened a door, and we really need to walk through that door with some cases and test the limits of Loper now. And honestly, the clip that you put on about Freedom Council, the conversation that we're in, that is the conversation today. We had a conversation today at noon, and the Loper case was at issue. Taxation was at issue. Local governments at issue. And by taxation, I'll give you the issue on that. We know real estate prices have gone up for many reasons. Well, guess what? In many states, your property taxes going to the school increase in lockstep with the increase in the value of your home. So all of a sudden here in Akron, our local school board has a 20% increased budget. Now, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. They had a budget of $200 million last year, and it's $240 million this year, where the only thing that happened is my house price went up and other people's house prices went up. So we need to make sure that our taxes are rational and related to the need, not just so we hand government money, because government always figures out a way to spend it. So that's sort of my rant for today, Clinton and John.
Yeah.
But I just see there's so many areas that Freedom Council is moving into now. And I think one of the key issues is obvious is property rights, and actually the idea of a alloidal title, where you actually own your property outright. It's not subject to tax. Those are issues that are actively before our state legislature in Ohio right now. So all of this stuff, very interesting, very, very interesting areas of litigation coming up.
Warner, have you guys ever considered making a public directory of, segregated by state of all of the members of Freedom Council, so that if somebody wanted to support an attorney with work that was part of the council, they could hire them? I know that it's complicated because you've got like 65 project kind of things going on where attorneys are targeted for their support of certain, institutions or beliefs. So I don't know, is that a risk or is there a benefit there?
It's a risk. So far, our process is that people can go to freedomcouncil.org and they can request an attorney. Then we present it to the group and see if somebody's available to call them from their given state. So that's how we're doing it right now. And I don't know about opening it up. I mean, that does create a number of risks. And the other thing, if you've noticed the way we litigate, I mean, it's not under a Freedom Council banner. We are sort of a network of support, almost an umbrella organization, because there's members of other nonprofits that are litigating that are also members of Freedom Council. So we don't have a banner called Freedom Council that we're suing under or anything like that, though we would like to start participating in what are called amicus briefs with the Supreme Court. I think that's an appropriate role for us. But,
I guess my suggestion is like, hey, let's say I need an attorney who is functional in, say, tax issues. That's totally unrelated necessarily, to Freedom Council's mission, but at the same time, I could give an attorney locally work, just and like auxiliary support, right, or ancillary support. Yeah. So that's just my thought. Like, and this isn't just with attorneys. This is with physicians, nurse practitioners, hospital systems, medical healthcare systems, dentists, everything. How do we find the like minds of these industries so that we can support them? Because otherwise, you're just going to go out and give the wrong guy all your hard-earned money. But we really do want to focus that into our freedom economy. Yeah. So maybe this is a longer-term issue that we need to look into. But it's like the Made in America thing. Well, how do we support freedom-loving patriots?
Well, one of the phrases that I came across and thought was wonderful was, "Why don't you hire an attorney who likes you?" instead of going to one of the big firms that are, using pronouns in their signature blocks and are supporting liberal causes, because the big firms, for the most part, did that, and
Right.
they were absent from the field when our civil rights were under attack. So it's only the small firms and solos who were on the field. And I think I should credit this to Marcella Burke from the Burke law firm, by the way. But she's great. But, one of the things she said is, why not hire an attorney who likes you? And that really makes sense. And that goes to what you're saying. These are attorneys who like you. If you're aligned with more of your constitutional rights, your civil rights, your religious rights, your family rights, all of that, these are attorneys who understand that alignment and will go to bat for you.
Well, good to know. Yeah, I think we definitely need more of that. It was the biggest thing in 2020 that I was upset about, was where were all the lawyers?
Well, they're very hard to find. That's true. I mean, that's how we formed. Every time a lawsuit would pop up, I'd call the lawyer, and we put them on initially just an email listserv. And that it was called the COVID litigation group. It still exists, but we've mostly transitioned into another platform. But we still have COVID litigation group listserv, but we wanted to expand into all these other issues that we saw coming down the pike, and that's why we broadened the name to Freedom Counsel, so that we really understand that our issue is freedom, constitutional rights, refounding the country. All of that stuff.
Warner, have you ever met Leigh Dundas?
I have not, actually. Is she coming on today?
Well, it's your lucky day. She's
I certainly know of Leigh. Of course I do. And in fact, she and I may have talked early on, but I have not been in touch with her since. So
for any of the viewers, she's the one in the intro video screaming, "We will never lock down." Yeah. I would submit to you that the Orange County Board of Supervisors is still having difficulty sitting after
this is the hill we die on, right? Yeah.
She is a powerhouse when it comes to just getting in their faces, man. She and I are thinking about making a holy war for hire industry. She'll bring the megaphone, I'll bring the camera. But so Clinton, we wanted to talk a little bit about informed consent issues that you were mentioning to me earlier today. You want to kind of fill us in?
Right, absolutely. So basically, with legislation that's going forward at the state level, there's sort of two types. There's the one type that says we've got to keep the health freedom rights of the ability to choose your own donor, called directed donation, and the ability to give to yourself, called autologous donation. We've got to keep those available, because those have really been, especially in the Northwest, like states like Washington or Oregon, Idaho, Montana, this has gotten a lot more difficult. And even now into Minnesota, Ohio, the American Red Cross has now made this more difficult by requiring onerous amounts of paperwork that doctors are not willing to do, whereas before this just used to be customary. So that's one type of legislation that we're doing to protect these rights at the state level. And of course, the blood banks are fighting us very hard on that. Now, the other thing, and this is really an interesting question, and I'm interested to hear Warner's take on it. The other aspect of this is informed consent. Because if you recall, when we were on with Kevin McKernan a few weeks ago, right, we were talking about the possibility and the evidence of integration from the DNA that's now occurring in people's systems through particularly the Pfizer vaccines, right? And so as he was explaining, Pfizer had reported to the FDA that they had purified what I call the background DNA out of the vials, out of the vats of their vaccine, so that you just had the mRNA, which that DNA produces. But then when they rolled it out for the public, they pulled a rather clumsy sleight of hand, because it was even barely hidden, yet the FDA missed it, that they had left the background DNA in there. So now there's all this DNA in these Pfizer shots that went out that is coated in the nanolipid particle, which means it's being delivered right into the cell in every organ of the body. And to make that worse, what the actual clumsy sleight of hand was they also included SV40 in there and then pretended it wasn't in there in a very awkward editing of their software that reports this stuff, but the FDA managed to miss it. So now we've got multiple undisclosed dangerous contaminants in these shots. And what's worse is by all appearances, they are integrating to some degree in the cells of the people that have received them. And when we talked off camera, as you recall with Kevin, he explained that there's two forms of integration. And the only question is whether it's going to be integrating for a shorter term or permanently, which means this is why in these studies in Australia and elsewhere that he reported on, they're finding this DNA in the bloodstream of patients they're looking at. And that shouldn't even be possible, right? Even though that DNA entered their system, it should not still be there if it was just free-floating naked DNA. But this has been integrated now, so they're reproducing it. So people's bodies are reproducing the vaccine DNA. And then, of course, we got Peter McCullough, who's reported on a patient 3.2 years after their last injection, still has mRNA present in their system. So what we've done, we're pushing an initial write-up of legislation for Florida, which says, look, there's an informed consent issue, right? If the blood banks are not tracking donor status, then people don't know what they're potentially getting into their blood through a transfusion. And so therefore, this must be tracked in order for there to be real patient informed consent. And if they do that, this has another great benefit, which it means if you go in for an emergency transfusion or a loved one does, someone you're advocating for, you can find the donor status, and then suddenly non-mRNA donor blood becomes available for emergency transfusions, which it's currently not. People don't realize that I even can't get non-mRNA blood in an absolute emergency, even working for Safe Blood. It's simply not available. You have to take what's off the shelf, and there's no informed consent right now in regards to that.
Just want to briefly mention that Leigh Dundas is here with us, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Hey, boys. Thanks for having me on.
Leigh has been definitely in the mud in Florida. You know, it looks nice on camera, but just because they have a great Surgeon General and a governor that's willing to speak out doesn't mean they're always doing the right thing, even in Florida. So I'm not surprised to hear that you would have difficulties even in that state.
Yeah, let me address the DNA issue. As Kevin explained, they use something called DNASE, D-N-A-S-E, to kill the DNA off in the vats of E. coli from which they extract the mRNA. And that's a process. This was a bait and switch on everybody, I think. You know, there was process one, which did not use the E. coli plasmid base. And then there's process two, which did use it. And that process two, was only tested against about 250 people. So it wasn't even at a level where you get statistical significance or where the FDA was, saying you could get a statistical read in terms of what it would do. So the testing against that minimal amount of people really left a lot of questions open. And what we've seen is the DNase used to kill off the E. coli DNA isn't doing it 100%. So you have some of this coming through and being incorporated into the shots, entering people's bodies. So I see three problems with the shots. They're real simple. One is that we have the E. coli DNA slipping through. The SV40 is the SV40 promoter segment. It's not the entire simian virus 40, but it's a portion of it. It's a promoter segment that allows the product to enter the cell. And then the third thing that Kevin has brought up is frame shifting. And frame shifting is where, it's as if you have a sentence, but you start the sentence 2 letters in and you try to read it. It's not going to make any sense, right? You just cut off the first 2 letters and you try to read that just as a string of letters, and it doesn't make any sense. Where if you put the first 2 back in, you can figure out those are words. Same thing sort of happens in the body. And the frame shifting is they don't accurately capture the proper frame. And as a result, we have unknown proteins being injected into people's bodies. And our bodies don't know how to handle that necessarily.
Yeah, the informed consent issue. When it came down to DNA testing, why is it we were all completely fine with DNA testing every single person on every single PCR test that came out? But when it came time to start cell typing and DNA testing tumors for SV40, oh, what? We don't do any of that. I have multiple family members who have tumors that we cannot get these tests on. And I really, maybe this is a McKernan thing, but we don't even know where to go to get that done. I've got VA doctors. They have no idea about this. But it seems to me that you might want to know the face of the enemy in a tumor by understanding its DNA structure. But we don't do that. But maybe that's going to change soon, because maybe the truth is they don't want to look because it would expose everything we've been talking about and reporting on.
There are a number of testing modalities that are before the FDA for approval right now. And, I think they ought to hurry it along and get those done so we can test and see what's going on.
Quite frankly, if there's anything that merits an emergency use authorization, it would be this cancer surge that we've got going on. But to transition a little bit, Leigh, you've been working and investigating something a little different, and it's the EMF issue, right?
Well,
do you want to fill us in?
Yeah, I was inspired to do a deep dive on it a couple of years ago. It was one of those things, and I'm sure you gentlemen have had this experience where you start a conversation in passing with somebody, and you have, you're kind of aligned together, and you're both going, oh yeah, that's bad, or oh yeah, that's good. And then, you go to grab a bite of lunch and you're sitting there at your desk and you're going, well, how much do I really know? I mean, I know the headline news on that topic, but I don't really know the deep dive. And the statement that came to me was from a Russian contractor who had come to my house the day of October 7th, a couple of years ago, when they were doing, maybe it was the 14th, I forget. And they were doing that weird frequency thing, across the country with all the cell phones. And I don't trust our government further, certainly at that point, than I could throw it. So I had turned all my devices off. We had unplugged everything electronic in the house. I mean, we went full paranoid schizophrenic on ourselves, and just decided to, light the candles and pretend it was a hurricane or an earthquake, and have a day of no electronics. And during the middle of this day is when this Russian contractor was supposed to come to our house. And I said, yeah, you're welcome to come give an estimate, bring a flashlight and leave your cell phone off, like as you approach our property. And he gets to the door and I said, did you leave your cell phone in your car and off? And he said, yeah, but I want to be transparent with you. I couldn't find your house, so I had to turn it on to use my GPS. And even though it was a couple hours after the weird emergency broadcast frequency sound that was going to play across all of our cell phones, when I powered mine back up, it made an awful racket. And he looked at me like really, really serious, like Leigh Dundas grabbing a microphone, to scream at a blue state governor, right? And he goes, I'm Russian. And I tell you, these frequencies, they can be very, very, very bad. And my government, we have long history using them for very bad purposes. And I don't trust what went on today. And I did what we all do. I said, I agree. And I 100%, I've heard that. I believe it. I know a bit about what you're talking about. And he gave us an estimate and he left. And eventually we turned back on our devices. And the next day I'm grabbing a bite of lunch. And I thought, well, shoot, what do I actually know about this other than frequencies can be used for good or bad ends? And I Googled it. I didn't DuckDuckGo it. I didn't go to a special browser. I Googled it. And I told my husband, I go, yeah, I'm just going to check this out for 15 or 20 minutes. Like 2 weeks later, 400 browser tabs open on my computer. I had done a deep dive that scared the living what out of me. And I knew that frequencies could be bad or good. I had no idea that Russia had been using frequencies back into the 50s. I had no idea that Nikola Tesla had been using frequencies in the 1800s. And what I found was just absolutely mind-boggling. But all of this sort of, I did a deep dive. I put it on the shelf. I didn't think much about it. And then I saw a friend sent me an alleged X post. I'm not on X. And it was, oh, Snowden is doing a new drop, a new whistleblowing release. This was like probably a week ago now. And the gist of it was, hey guys, HARP up in Alaska, where they're shooting high frequencies into the, far high up atmosphere, 50 to 600 miles above the Earth's surface, is not actually, what we think it is, and just bent to modify our weather. They're actually trying to screw with our brains, screw with our cells, and actually control our emotions. And they're, combining it with the fact that anybody who's gotten the vaccine, back to where we jumped off from, is basically a walking antenna from heavy metal exposure at this point. And of course, we've all got, little bitty transmitters in our pockets at all times as well. And the combination of this 33 acres of 180 antennas up in the wilds of Alaska, combined with satellites, combined with cell towers all over the planet, is basically designed to inundate our brains, and they can control our emotions with that. And everybody was going off on Twitter, and you fact check it, and all of the fact checkers are like, oh, Snowden hasn't done anything, there's nothing to this. But regardless of whether Snowden's talking about it or not this week, the reality is Russia had the jump on us. This goes back to the 50s. In 1960, our embassy in Moscow was reporting all of the workers there were getting really sick. They were reporting, brain fog. They couldn't do simple normal tasks. The embassy, the ambassador died of some leukemia-like disease. And the State Department and the CIA back home here got kind of worried. And they started keeping track of the boy's symptoms over in the Russian embassy. And they put monkeys and lab rats into the embassy. And then they just let it roll. They didn't warn the workers what they were discovering that was going on. They just let that ride. And the white cell count of our embassy workers was 40% higher than normal. It went on for 15 years. And in 1975, when I was barely 3 years old, Kissinger, who was in charge of the State Department at that point, sent a telegram to the embassy workers that said, now we're going to come clean, subject radiation and EMF dangers. Beginning in 1960, mind you, this is 75 at this point, the Soviet Union directed high-frequency beams of radiation at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, which were calculated not to pick up intelligence, but rather to cause physiological effects on personnel on the ground. The effects the Soviets calculated to achieve in these personnel included malaise, irritability, and extreme fatigue. At the time, the Soviets believed the effects would be temporary. But subsequently, you all can figure out where this is going. Subsequently, it's been verified that the effects were anything but temporary. They were not temporary. And they were, in fact, causing cataracts, blood changes that induce heart attacks, malignancies, circulatory problems, and permanent deterioration of the nervous system. And just for kicks and giggles, by the way, in most cases, these after effects, quote, do not become evident until long after exposure, i.e. a decade or more. So pretty darn crazy. They had a big hit right after Trump took office the first time on our Havana embassy. I don't know, John, do you know if I can share a screen and just roll a 1 minute CNN thing on?
You may be able to,
well,
but my keyboard has decided in the middle of this interview to die.
Yeah, no worries. But yeah, there was another hit against our Havana embassy, and 25 staff down there were reporting they were sick as dogs when they were at work or in their sleeping quarters, but they were fine when they were buying fresh fruit at the market in the city. And State Department sent 3 neuro MD, PhDs guys down there. 100% of our workers had objectively abnormal balance disorders in their inner ear and seriously disturbed cognitive patterns. So that was sort of the bookending. We had 2 frequency attacks that we know were frequency attacks on our embassy workers, one in the 60s, one in like 2017, I think it was. And in the middle of that, I stumbled into the Rwandan genocide, which I just thought was the Rwandan genocide in 1994, where the Hutus and the Tutsis, the 2 warring tribes, each blamed the other tribe for the death of their president, who had gone down on a plane full of his senior cabinet officials, him and the officials who crashed to the ground. And everybody blamed the other side, and they were pissed off, and they were throwing rocks and lobbing spears at each other, but they were not genocidal. That's what we know for sure. What is alleged is CIA was on the ground. They were doing a disinformation campaign designed to foment upset between the 2 sides. And after about 2 weeks, when they realized the extent of the upset that they were able to achieve was lobbing of rocks and spears, they then lifted off these C-130 enormous planes, flew them at really low altitude over the guys on the ground, and they'd been retrofitted with these big like microwave dishes, and they were beaming frequencies at these guys. And there are actual hertzes that they have figured out can induce feelings. So I'm not going to say it on open air because we don't need a serial killer or mass killer getting a hold of it. But at a certain frequency, you can induce feelings of being high and happy, like you've had 5 drinks at a fraternity party. And if you go 1 hertz below that, you can make a person seriously suicidally depressed. If you go 4 or 5 hertz points above both of those readings, you can induce homicidal rage and genocidal mania, riot kind of thing. So the allegation, Operation Crimson Mist, allegedly did just that in Rwanda, much to the dismay and demise of a good portion of their population. And again, it sounds like sci-fi. I was reading this and I was still kind of going, I don't know. And then I'll wrap this up because I know I'm doing sort of a monologue here. I found the work of Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher-Bies. She was, I think, born in the 30s. The woman was freaking Einstein by another name. She was attached to the Stanford Linear Accelerator Lab, the Stanford Research Institute Radiophysics Lab, Lawrence Livermore Labs, NASA picked her up, our DOD picked her up. She has more patents on frequency work than, again, you could choke a horse. And at some point she was teaching, I don't know, like nuclear fusion or something to undergrads at Berkeley, and she got their permission to experiment on them. And she and her very nerdy husband, who was equally gifted, like to build machinery, they beamed her, a certain frequency at half the class. And immediately all of her students were reduced to like shaking and chattering and looking like they were outside in a, February -40 winter in Alaska. And the other half of the class looks at the professor and goes, yeah, that's a nice party trick, Teach. How much did you have to pay him to do the Oscar performance over there? And she goes, oh, you don't believe? And she swings the device on the non-believers. The whole class is now incoherent, shaking, chattering. So she goes on CNN. CNN does an expose. You guys should look it up. It's right up your alley. In the 1980s, I'm wearing hair out to here, neon green and yellow, and I'm in like 6th grade. Chuck Del Caro was a correspondent on CNN. He did a 3 or 5 part series, deep hour-long dives. He agrees to go into this woman and her husband's lab. They blindfold him, and they basically sensory deprive him. They put like full-on microphone on so he cannot hear anything, he can't see anything, and they get his agreement to beam frequencies at his mind that are carrying, embedded in the electrical signal of the frequency, certain geometric shapes like squares, triangles, whatever. And you see the CNN guy, and he's in the lab, and the husband of this woman that I'm telling you about goes, okay, now just call out any shapes that you see floating by in your mind's eye. And you see Chuck Del Caro at CNN go, a parabola just went by.
Wow.
The quote at the end of this her quote was, where is it? Give me the money in 3 months' time, and I will be able to affect the behavior of 80% of the people in any town in America without their even knowing it. Make them happy, or at least they'll think they're happy, or make them aggressive. At which point CNN cuts to a Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel laureate kind of guy. And he's an astrophysicist, and he's talking about the military applications of this and the fact that, you could avoid using nuclear bombs by just jamming the frequencies in the other, and the enemy's minds and their fighter pilots' machinery using these frequencies. And again, at the time CNN did this expose, I was like in junior high. I mean, we're talking 40 years ago. So they have had this capability for a darn long time, regardless of whether Snowden actually did a drop or not last week. The work was built on Kuznetsov's work in the Soviet country back in the 50s. But what they don't tell you is that in addition to him having proved in the 50s that any cellular death and disease can be induced by specific electromagnetic patterns carried on a signal if the target cells are bombarded with the pattern carrying carrier signals for enough time, what was not published was his corresponding work showing electromagnetic reversal of cellular death and disease conditions of any type. They have known how to cure humanity for 70 freaking years.
Yeah, I mean, if you, yeah, it sounds like the Rife machines, if you've come across that. Yeah. And I have, and I think the EMF issues, I mean, Clinton, that kind of goes to blood too. Electromagnetic radiation affects the blood and how it flows in the body, right?
Yeah, that could definitely be a significant consequence of that. What's interesting to me, Leigh, about what you just presented is that at this conference that I was just at in Cleveland, this Healthy America Patient First conference, one of the most interesting breakout sessions I attended was led by Odette Welkins, who is a lawyer out of New York. And she is the co-founder of the National Call for Safe Technology. She herself suffered, I believe, an eye injury due to a smart reader for her electrical, right, that was positioned on the outside of the building, but right next to her bed. And so she has gone way into the dangers of cell phone and 5G technology. Like, there's people all over the country, 5G towers get put up outside their house, and now suddenly they're sick and vomiting and having to, I actually saw people who had to move to a cabin in the woods to get away from this, can't go into their home that they just recently purchased. And there's no legal recourse against the big telecom companies putting these up. They go up and there's nothing you can do about it, but now your home values drop by 20% and you're sick and you can't inhabit your own home. And the first question I then had with what you presented was, are these frequencies you described deployable through 5G?
Yeah, I believe they are. I know Daphne Tackover, I think, is the female attorney. I think she splits her time between Israel and here, that was working sort of side by side, fist and glove with CHD for a long time on trying to keep towers out, get them removed when people, get hit with meters that they don't even consent to. We actually had an EMF guy. He was the husband of one of our patients, my husband's patient's husband. And he was sort of a nerdy guy, and he just did EMF remediation on commercial buildings, but he would also sort of, moonlight and do homes. And we paid him to come down and assess our home. And he's got all these Scooby-Doo gadgets, and you can go in your house and he puts them, in front of your TV and your microwave and in your bed and your bathroom. And you can just see them start to go nuclear. It was incredible to me. I expected them to go bonzo in front of my entertainment center, in front of my microwave. We all know the basics, in front of my cell phone, in front of my laptop if it's connected to the outside world. But we turn everything off, and it's still pinging at intervals like this. And he goes, you still got something going on. We go into our back bedroom, our guest room, and it's my daughter's Xbox, and she's a girl, not a boy. She plays it like once a year to do dance parties with her girlfriends. She's not gaming in there every darn day, thank God. And he goes, oh, it's the Xbox. Like, he's literally like Nancy Drew Scooby-Dooing his way to the source, right, to the house. And I go, well, and it's unnerving. Like, I'm like, ooh, now that I know the source. And he goes, well, turn it off. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm already like over there trying to figure out how to turn off the dang Xbox. And I do, and it's still pinging. And I'm like, mother trucker. And I yank out the electrical cord, and it's still pinging. And an hour later, as the guy is leaving my house, having identified all the hot spots that he's going to hardwire us back to the 80s on and get rid of our Wi-Fi, get rid of our smart meter, get rid of everything, it's still pinging. I freaking ripped that thing in foil, wrap it in foil, throw it on the far side of the garage. I was like, this is crazy. And it was an old Xbox. It wasn't one of the new ones. We don't have Siri in our house. But I can tell you, he said, well, go get your meter put back in, the old meter, not the new meter. They didn't even tell us when they replaced our meter. Like, I actually read my mail. I'm a lawyer like some of you guys, right? So we get the old meter in. In the meantime, he builds this old school cone with my Reynolds wrap around the meter, pointing basically at my neighbor to direct it over there. I'm like, does this actually work? Is that why like the paranoid schizophrenics in downtown LA are wearing little foil hats? And he goes, yeah, it actually does, along with lead paint, and there's insulation you can put in your attic if you got something coming in from the street. And I said, well, okay, that's great. And then he shows me a study on his way out, and they put mice at the base of these 5G towers. And the first generation of rats are just schizoid as all get out. They're like trying to eat their babies and eat each other. And, they're like Rwandan genocide, or they're like just apathetic and like eating the cheese nonstop, like they're coke addicts with their food. I mean, it's all kinds of aberration, right, in the cage. And by the next generation down, the grandchild of the, original matriarch and patriarch rat, they are completely infertile and incapable of reproducing at all from living at the bottom of any tower. It is frightening stuff. So if you don't know about this,
well, I have some updates for you, actually. I participate with the CHD group occasionally, and we have 2 smart meter cases here in Ohio. We have 2 injunctions that have been granted while we do the litigation against Streetsboro and Rootstown here in Ohio. So we have 2 cases going right now. And then Scotty McCullough, attorney Scott McCullough out of Texas. Have you heard of him, Leigh?
I've heard his name. I don't know him directly.
But he's very willing to help any attorney who's willing to take on these cases. He's been a big help to us, and certainly everything we're learning in our litigation. And we have a fragile child in one of the households that is the lead plaintiff on the lawsuit. But we have a case against Cuyahoga Falls as well, just north of Akron. So we're actively looking at those issues, and I have heard the exact same story Clinton has heard, from people who are literally driven from their homes when the wireless networks go in. And that, you're right, it devalues the home, and God help, if the next people come in buying it unsuspecting. There is a group, there is a FCC docket called docket number 25-276. And there is a website called 25-276.org, 25-276.org. And the issue there is to try to at least maintain some local control and local input of the siting of these towers, because there is an effort by industry to nationalize this and make it completely out of our control. And it's pretty much out of our control right now, as you know. But we are trying to, we are working on those issues here in Ohio, definitely. And there are people organizing. I think they are waking up to the problem. And and of course I think about, what's the interaction with whatever's in the vaccine with all this electromagnetic radiation. And what's the impact on our blood and our blood supply? It's another impact. It's another potentially damaging impact. So,
well, all of these weird science experiments that are being conducted on the American people. We think, Ralph Merrick's going to get in trouble. What he did. No, he's not. He did a great job. They reward him as a good and faithful servant, like Renfield to Dracula. Same thing with these 5G weapons. I mean, they did experiments. You probably saw it. It was in Castaic or Santa Clarita Valley. Prison experiments were done on prisoners in, I think, 2009 for crowd control sonic weapons.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
These experiments will continue at pace, and they will increase in frenzy or freneticism or whatever, until some of these assholes are held accountable. Yeah. I had an epiphany a few years ago. How many death row inmates do you think went to Harvard? Do you think it's because they're less likely to commit murder? Or are they more likely to know how to get away with it?
Well, I think they commit murder at a different scale. I mean, you're into corporate scale. I mean, if you look at what Pfizer did, which a lot of it I believe to be criminal. In fact, they've been convicted as a criminal organization. Did their failure to warn everybody about the ingredients of this vaccine purposely omitting the SV40 segment, for example, from the FDA and the EMA, purposefully not telling people about the DNA integration, at what point does that become a homicide? And then how many homicides have there been? I mean, my view is we've had, somewhere between 500 to 800,000 vaccine injury deaths, not to count 3-4 million disabled. So the scope and scale of the death and destruction that you can wreak when you go to Harvard and work for one of these big corporations is really, really something. Look at the PFAS issue. Look at the Teflon issue. Look at, all these big tragedies. Look at Bhopal, if we want to go to another country, and what happened there with Union Carbide, right? A long time ago. But just, this is just, it's unethical, inhuman behavior foisted upon our fellow human beings.
Until accountability is held against these these educated elites, we will not have justice, and it will not stop.
Well, I mean, look at Pfizer though, right? They hid the fact that they were told by the FDA that if you don't do the same process to purify the DNA out of the shots, then you've got to redo a trial. They didn't do that, and then they hid the SV40, right, which is going to suppress. And I understand that you might correct me on this, Warner, but it's my understanding the SV40 that they left in there will suppress the P53 gene that suppresses tumors. And then just a few months later, I mean, very shortly after the rollout, they're the big pharma company that spends $45 billion acquiring two cancer biotech companies to now start treating cancer with, and they should be the leading cause of cancer worldwide now. So this seems to me like, I mean, this takes, another Harvard graduate like the Unabomber to extraordinary new levels.
Well, I view it this way, and the word I use, I mean, we're certainly commodities as human beings, as individuals. We're certainly being harvested. We're being harvested for our wealth, our energy, everything you can imagine. Those are words that I've come to use as I understand more and more about food and medicine and education and healthcare. We just seem to be sitting here being harvested by these big companies for profits. And unfortunately, it's in every domain that I seem to look at. That's kind of what I feel at this point. And I'm not happy that I feel that way, but I certainly want to do everything we can to roll that back. And I think that starts with things like informed consent.
Well, so our solutions are: you get laws passed that aren't enforced. You go to file suits in jurisdictions where the judge has some level of corruption, Boasberg or whatever is in place, and they obstruct it till you don't have standing.
You're being too negative. You're being too negative.
If only we hadn't just barely survived an apocalyptic bioweapon attack.
I know, but I mean, think about the lawyers, and Leigh maybe can weigh in on this as well. But were we not here, where would we be?
Right. I'm glad you're here.
If we did,
but
if we did not have a somewhat functioning Article III court system and state court system, where would we be? We have significantly rolled this back because of the focus and effort of the lawyers, and it has exposed weaknesses in the system that disincentivize maybe even lawyers or plaintiffs for bringing the cases. We need to fix those disincentives and go forward. And as small and as small firm and solo practitioners, we are banding together, and that is helping a great deal, improving all of us. I don't have I think we begin by fighting the problem and engaging in the battle. We actually know what the problem is, and without having engaged, we wouldn't have any idea. I don't know, Leigh, what do you think about that?
I agree that the courts are probably the last hope to turn the tide or hold back the tide in the direction in which it's headed. But I am a believer, after the last 5 years especially, that courts of law follow courts of public opinion. I did not see any hope that the blue state courts were going to get anything right on the mandate cases. And I told that to Bobby point blank. I told it to Simone point blank. I told it to every lawyer in my state who called. I told it to a retired Ninth Court, Circuit Court of Appeals, federal court judge on a conference call. And I said, I really hope I'm wrong. I am not wedded to my opinion. I am hoping that all y'all go file lawsuits. And, every damn day I wake up and realize that some judge said, being forced to wear a mask is absolutely unconstitutional. Being locked in your home and not able to travel without a vaccine passport is absolutely unconstitutional. But I fear that I'm not going to be wrong, because I work and I live and have for 15 years almost in third world countries that don't have any operating court system to speak of. And what we saw, unfortunately, in the blue states in the beginning is that I was almost 100% correct. For every 100 cases that were probably filed, maybe one or two was successful, and not, i.e., threw a verdict at the trial court, withstood it on appeal, successful as in, oh, the other side, the city, the county got scared that they might take a hit in the trial court, so they just withdrew their position. And I'm like, okay, but you didn't need to file a lawsuit to cause that to happen. You could have sent me outside their office building with a big old group of 20,000 people and me naming and shaming their CEO and probably gotten them to pull their punch. But that was early days. People who know more do better. I am a firm believer in that. And the gorgeous, wonderful thing about these awful, awful shots is they are an equal opportunity employer. They are just as likely to kill your child or my child as they are the judge down the street's wife, or the legislator or governor's sister. And I said many years ago, the quickest way to get over and out of this childhood vaccine issue thing would be to mandate all of these shots for all of us who are 50, 60, 70 years old. And when all of these lawyers and judges and legislators' wives start dropping dead and having sudden infant death syndrome at age 52, you're going to realize that these shots are harmful. And then we're going to get in the community, which includes lawyers and judges and legislators, to critical mass and a tipping point. And then I talked to a guy in Washington, D.C. after a rally in 2020 who had, invented email or something. I forget what his name was. But he said, you know what the tipping point is mathematically? Because I'm not a math Einstein kind of girl. I'm a word person. And I go, no, what is it? 51%, 50.5%? Like, that's what logic would tell you if you're not a math nerd. And he goes, if you look at all of the historical curves where we were on the wrong side of justice, women can't vote, Black people can't vote, Black people can't use the same bathroom, you name it, whatever it is. The tipping point was not 51%. It was 3 to 3.5% of the population going, you know what? We should not be fire hosing and sicking German Shepherd dogs on little Black 12-year-olds for walking into a deli in Alabama or trying to go to school in Arkansas. That's not okay when Ma and Pa Kettle eating corn dogs in front of the TV go, I'm kind of racist, but even I think that that's kind of over the top and not okay. And when you get 3.5% of the people thinking that, you've won. And when that guy told me that, I was like, damn, is that really the case? And as COVID played out, I believe that is the case. I don't think it's 51%. Maybe it's a little north of 3%. But I will tell you this. We are getting to critical mass. Everybody now knows, Democrat, Republican, believer in science, unbeliever in science, paranoid, whatever, conspiracy theorist, or somebody who's, nope, just the facts all day long, all the facts. Everybody now knows somebody who was dead or injured by this damn vaccine, and they are thinking twice. And the studies are coming out that show, faith in pharma is down to like historical lows, like 60% from like a high of 95. And when you get to that, and you pair that with a still working, not great working, not optimally working, not working as well as it probably did before I was born working, but it's still lugging along with 3 flat tires and sort of a kind of an engine, and you have to push start it, justice system, Article 3, back to your reference, then you have a hope. And I think we are to that tipping point. You are now starting to get correct decisions out of not just, I said forum shopping at the beginning. Simone's like, I got a plaintiff in California. I'm like, F it. You're not going to win that case. And she came back to me a year later. She said, we filed 11 lawsuits and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, in California, in 9th Circuit territory, and you got them all dismissed. And I told you that was going to happen. Find a plaintiff in Texas. Find a plaintiff in a rural county that has one judge. You know how he voted, and you know that he doesn't take everything at face value and that he'll actually look, not just listen to the PR spiel on the science. And then you will get a single guy sticking his head above the hedgerow and going, you know what, it's not actually right to make Jewish people in ovens just because they believe differently than we do. You know what, maybe this Pfizer mandate is not actually constitutional, whatever. And when you get that guy doing it and another in Bama and another in Mississippi, now you might have a blue state judge going, well, there's precedent from other jurisdictions and I'm cowardly as they come, but yeah, now I'll actually get to the right result on this. And I'll be darned if we didn't do that. But how did we do that? We did a nationwide walkout in fall of 21. And I am here to tell you that all of the people who never play nicely in the sandbox together, Simone, Bobby, me, Del Bigtree, just McCullough, like just all the people Flynn, who've now had infighting, I was backstage with, and I'm like, hey, we have the ability to do a nationwide walkout and get Lockheed and Boeing and all of the people who work at the 6 nuclear facilities that 100% control all of our offensive, defensive nuclear capability in its entirety in the US, and power, water, dam, trash, bailiffs, law enforcement, teachers, nurses, doctors who've been wanting to do walkouts for a year, and they're doing them in fits and starts, but they're not doing it together. So they're not actually having a synergistic effect. We can do this in one solid week, November 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and actually probably cause quite the hiccup in the supply chain. And simultaneously, we need to be back channeling what we're doing to the federal court judges in the red states who have been sitting there going, yeah, I keep getting these mandate cases and I keep dismissing them on a technicality because I don't want to be the first judge to rule that Biden's doing unconstitutional stuff. But if you break the supply chain, or you have these people who are not required to go to work, it's an at-will system, walk off the job together, and you explain to the judges, you can continue to shirk your constitutional duty and your oath, go right ahead. But when you do, your wife isn't going to have so much as a stitch of toilet paper, let alone kids under the Christmas tree for the grandkids and presents for that come Christmas time in 3 months. Knock yourself out. But if you continue to stay off the bench and out of the game, you're going to be living in the equivalent of a third world country because the workers are going to do what you're too scared to do. Then you may have a hope of a judge doing the right thing. So we did that walkout November 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. Nobody picked it up. But I mean, I am telling you, millions of people across the country walked out. We couldn't do a rally because Verizon had walked out so hard that we weren't getting cell service that day in LA. And the combined effect of that caused our first decision out of the 5th Circuit, I think it was, Southeastern US, 3-judge panel, midnight of Friday, like November 12th, 21-page decision where they said Biden's vaccine mandate is hands down unconstitutional. To force workers to choose between a job or a jab is not the way we roll in this country. So yes, the court system can, and I believe will, do the right thing. But do they need our help? Yes, because sitting alone, they're too scared to do their job. They need the public pressure. And the way we do that, thank you, John Davidson, for Broken Truth TV, is by having folks like us sit on our microphones and explain to the world what is actually going on. And I think most people are good. And I think most people are actually pretty smart, and they're actually pretty intuitive. I think 80% of the population falls into that category. And when you give them enough data, they start actually solving the equation correctly. And once you ring that bell in their head, you can't ever unring it. And once you break their faith in pharma, they're never going back. Not on a vaccine and not on their mother's new diabetes drug. It is a rule and a cognition and an aha moment that will transcend and transform their lives. And that's, I think, the renaissance we are walking into. But was it a hell of a fight? Yeah. And were the lawyers doing it and the judges in the beginning? Not to the extent they should have, but with a little help from we the people, they finally are getting there. And the last thing I would say, because I try to not practice when I can avoid it, is I think we need to approach this whole thing like Al Capone. They never got him on what they should have gotten him on, right? They got him on other stuff. And I think apparently in Florida, they are still running safe and effective Pfizer ads or something like that. Some good person just told me that. And they said, can't you do something with us? And I said, well, I know in California, we have very strict truth in advertising laws in this state. And you go to jail and you pay really big fines if you are saying anything that's incorrect. And we all know that for everything pharma says is incorrect, particularly as it relates to this vaccine. So if they are still saying especially in these red states where we know the Surgeon General, Latipo and I talk all the time, where we know DeSantis and governors like that are friendly to our position. All we need to do is take an ad that says, it has pharma going, oh, it's wonderful, prove with people like you guys, no, it ain't, and now we've got the goods on it and the receipts, and then we have the AG and the Surgeon General in that state go to town, file a suit in front of minimally unbiased judges, probably friendly judges at this point, and we take them down on truth in advertising, screw the other stuff. You know, you're not fighting it on a constitutional basis. You're just straight up saying we can prove that when you said it was safe and effective, you had every reason to know otherwise. People were dying. The miscarriage rate was 76%, you know, whatever the stats are. And we just let the justice system in the red states, again, forum shop it, do what they do best. I think we can do that. I think we can make that case, but I don't want to be the one doing it. I just want to call the strategy on it.
Paxton is, you know, the only state AG I've heard of that's willing to investigate these things.
Well,
I don't even know the
Kansas too. Chris Kobach, of course, and then
okay.
No, I was at the Republican Attorney General's Association a month or so ago, and you know, Louisiana, Kansas, Texas, Florida. You know, there are Missouri as well. I mean, there are AGs who are very interested, and a number of them who actually have lawsuits pending and filed. So it's moving slowly, more slowly than I would like. But I can tell you that the AGs are moving. And I'm very happy to see it. And they were very welcoming to Freedom Council at the RAGA conference. It's what it's called. And we made a lot of great connections. And, you know, our litigation against Pfizer and our time in battle now is 5 years. So we have a lot of information, which, of course, we're willing to share with anybody who needs it. And we have a beautiful network of experts all around the world that can weigh in on any specific item that somebody wants to know.
Warner, I was asked to sit down with Paxton's office probably in 21 by some other lawyers out here. He was gone that day, but it was his deputy AGs who were in the room. They were amenable to hearing the truth back then and taking sort of these cases. And it was shocking to me because I hit the ground running, talking rapid fire like we all are on this call today. And halfway through my little spiel, one of the deputy AGs goes, "Ma'am, can you roll it back? Card what?" And I went, "Oh dear. Let me just take it back to third grade language. I assumed that we were all unvaxxed and had a baseline understanding, and boy, was I wrong." So at that point, I rewound the tape all the way back to the beginning and very, conscientiously and slowly broke it down. And I got done with my second pass of this. And, we were at one of those long, oblong conference tables with like 20 people.
I can picture it now. I've been in similar situations.
I'm at this end, and they're at that end. The guy had stopped me mid, firecracker spiel the first time. And he looks at the guy next to him and he goes, "Well, I got my first Pfizer shot, but I can tell you this right now, I ain't getting my second one."
Right.
You were very amenable, like I said, years ago. And then I have since become very friendly with Latipo, who I know talks to DeSantis every darn day probably. And I think it might be time for you and me and the freedom councils of the world to sit down. And if these states at the AG level aren't already chasing cases on an advertising, false advertising, truth in advertising basis with their state statutes, maybe wrestling something up along those lines, because I just think that case is ripe for the picking, and I think it would be successful. And if you've got all the Pfizer data from your other litigation and you just, mind meld it over to the AG's office in these warm and fuzzy states, I think that's a marriage made in heaven right about now. So I think we should do it. Boys, I have to jump to another meeting, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, John, for having me on today. And if any of your people want to find me, since I'm a little elusive, it's leighdundas.com. And my mommy gave me extra letters in my name. It's Leigh, just to make it really confusing to pronounce. There's 5 letters there, leighdundas.com. If you want to know more about the frequencies, how we can use them for good, stem cell to reverse some of this stuff, which my husband's office does. It's not LifeWave patches, it's actual injectable. They're getting quadriplegics walking. If you guys have not heard the news on that, ABC News last year, this boy was a surfer. He's an old guy. He's got gray hair, paralyzed for 7 years. ABC News was in his backyard April 2nd, 24. They did stem cell on his spinal cord, and that boy is walking around his pool deck with a cane. So if you don't know much about stem cell, highly efficacious. The EMF stuff, I've got a world of living up here on what people can do to make their houses safer if they are too close to sort of a 5G tower. And I'm happy to share it because I can't do math or science, but God knows I can talk. So again, LeighDundas.com if anybody wants to find me. And I'd love to stay in touch with everybody on this call, Clinton and Warner.
And Leigh, you are on Freedom Council. I know you had an invite to Freedom Council. So, please join us over there. We have various, every Monday at noon, right before this show, we have a discussion. It's general, wide open, whatever you want to bring to the table. And it's, I think I'd love to see you there more often.
Well, now that I'm not, running around the country doing convoys as a lawyer, I might have time to actually get on those calls a little more frequently than I have in the past 4.5 years. But thank you for the invite. I'll dig it out of my inbox and do what I need to do to activate so I can get your updates there, because I know you guys are doing great work. And the more we share, the less, many hands make for light work. So I think we're getting there. And I can't wait to see under the Bobby Kennedy HHS side and Trump and all of us little guys like Broken Truth starting to spread the word where we end up going over the next 10 years. Because I think we're actually going to see, like I said a second ago, a renaissance. And for my part, I'm an impatient sort, in case you couldn't tell. And I think it's long overdue. And I hope I live long enough to see it fully come into its own glory. But I'm going to hop off, guys. I'll let you do your thing. John, thanks for inviting me at the last second. And have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you, Leigh. Great to see you. I think we went over an hour, John. Oh, for some reason I can't hear you now.
That was interesting.
Sorry, I think we went over an hour. Yeah, you're right. So anyway, any final thoughts,
Hard to
Warner?
stop Leigh. She's a freight train of information.
I know.
Well, that was encouraging,
Yeah.
I mean, we need some encouragement right about now. And Warner, I really appreciate that, like keeping our spirits up about what actually can be effectuated.
Well, I just feel
I get pessimistic, but it's just I'm impatient.
Yeah, we're all impatient, but like I said, I think you have to engage in the fight to know, what can be done. We win through our losses, essentially. Didn't Lincoln run for president multiple times and lost most of his elections? And next thing you know, there he is running the country. So, it's not, loss is not, helps to build understanding and strategies.
Well, I'd like to win anyway, if that's okay.
Well, I want to win every day.
I'd rather be stupid than a winner.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hopefully I'll see you guys soon in person, a couple of weeks in Austin. All right.
Good.
Sounds good. All right. Let's see if I can play my little outro. There we go.
Clinton, are you for sure going to be in Austin?